All right. I want to make a few comments for this TE 899 class. This is not a class on law and ESL. I have a class on that, 825. But in Chapter 2, they give just a brief discussion. I have to say that there has not, in fact, there's been an assumption that as part of constitutional right, ELLs have a right to an education. Question is, do they have a right to an ESL type class or an accommodation for that? Now, you know that disabled students have special education with the IDEA Act. They have very specific rules about having an IEP, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this does not exist as a clear legal platform for ESL students. There's kind of an assumption there, and they base a lot of it on a law they mentioned, a ruling, Law versus Nichols in 1974, which was a case involving Chinese students in San Francisco schools getting appropriate education. So that has been the basis, and that has been instituted by the U.S. Department of Education. But you know, this year, a lot of things are dramatically changing under Trump. So you can take it with a big grain of salt that students on paper have a right to have an accommodation, but there are a lot of states. California did this, Arizona, I think some other states, where they try to put the kibosh on that and just say, you know, sink or swim, we're not going to have any ESL assistance for you. In fact, I want to note that they mandated in California, prior to the dramatic change in politics in California, a more conservative governor, and people voted that there wouldn't be bilingual education in California, there'd only be English only. And I want to note on page 33, they say that has not been successful in academic improvement for students. And I can affirm that that would not happen. The whole purpose, when I mentioned things like the SIOP and different approaches and differentiated education, we know we do this for disabilities. ESL is not a disability. On the other hand, it is a situation that has to be addressed. So I'll just let it go at that. So I don't want to make the statement that, you know, it's against the Constitution, because it's not in the Constitution. There's been a pro ESL stance by most federal and many states, but that's not consistent. So it could be theoretically possible under this Trump administration that could just be torn to pieces. Then a state may decide that they're going to pass a law, and that gets more complicated. You know, our system is decentralized in so many ways. The Lau versus Nichols decision is very vulnerable, and I think I would leave it at that. The advocacy for working with ELLs is a moral advocacy, and if you're going to just assume certain states don't get the right, you know, or certain individuals in certain states can be ignored in ESL, you know, the options are that if the U.S. Civil Rights Department enforces ESL, access to ESL education, that's important, but you can't usually file a federal lawsuit over every time a certain principal or certain group of teachers or a certain school board decides they're not going to provide certain services. Now, you have a clear avenue for legal complaint with disabilities, special education, the IDEA Act, but that is not, Lau is not, it is part of the Civil Rights Act, but it's not federal law. Supreme Court never mandated bilingual education. And I do want to tell you that, just like the word multicultural in my other class, bilingual education is sometimes a poisonous word because opponents to something that has the word bilingual, well, or bicultural or anything like that, it will rise up quickly and claim that this is a threat to the culture. So I just want to put you kind of in a general way of knowing what the situation is there. Another comment I wanted to make in this chapter, because I'm trying to hit the high points. I'm not going to test you over law or something. But ESL certification, like for instance with this program, some states require it. Some states require some ESL coursework for all teachers. Nebraska doesn't. They mention diversity, and they want you to have experiences working with and field experiences with ELLs, but it's not mandated and it's not a coursework. So people that come to me, they take their ESL coursework and they get a specific endorsement, which actually can be a big advantage if you have a school that has large immigrant population or refugees. I do want to emphasize refugees are people that are allowed in the United States because of an imminent threat to their lives, whereas immigrants may be coming here having legally obtained the paperwork to enter the United States, or in many cases they're without papers. I call sin documentos, without papers in Spanish, or wherever they're from, they enter without papers, and you hear the term illegal. I don't use the term illegal alien, first of all, because language is everything when we discuss diversity, in particular when we discuss immigration issues. One side or another is very sensitive to that. Some people like saying illegal alien, and they keep pushing alien in the word illegal, and they kind of use it in a negative way, kind of like that monster on the old space show and, you know, hatch its babies out of people's stomachs, and it was the alien. So that term is often used, or used by people watching UFO shows. As far as the second language acquisition theories, and I've already given you some information on that. They mentioned in here on page 36, Cummins, Jim Cummins, and he was kind of a breakthrough recognizing the issues of second language acquisition, particularly not for foreign language teaching, like learning Spanish or French or German in American schools, but dealing with a large number of individuals that are still not in school, that are in a country where their language is not the first language, and where they have to learn both basic interpersonal skills, BICS, and you know that takes at least a couple of years, maybe even less, depending on your age and how quickly you grasp another language. For instance, if you put me in Poland right now and I'm older and I try to adjust to speaking Polish, it might take me 3 years. I would, if I'm forced to use it all the time, I probably would acquire quite a bit of Polish within even 2 years. Whether I'd be that fluent just in basic conversation, I probably could make myself understood, but I wouldn't be a conversationalist like I am, you see before you. However, the academic is another issue. And the academic, and Cummins mentions this, that if you have the academic skills already in your first language, then learning them in the second language is not so difficult. Example, let's say I had to write an essay in Polish, and I already write fairly well in English, especially essays or research papers and things. I would have a much better opportunity. I would already understand the concepts of how to format and how and thesis and supporting and research and things like that. I would be concerned with the specific way I put the words on the paper and get the vocabulary right. I may have to have somebody help me with that. But I would know about the academics. I wouldn't be intimidated by it. Whereas if you take an individual that knows street English or street anything, and they have to go and learn, they have to learn to write papers in that language they're learning. Well, if they don't know how to write them in the first language, trying to learn something of an academic type language and learning it in a second language is quite a stretch, because you're not used to it. If you've never written a research paper in English and then you have to write in Polish, it's going to be too much for a lot of people. It's just overwhelming. That's why there's an emphasis on bilingual education. The idea is they want to nurture you or teach you in a comfortable first language where you can make the transition from speaking the language to reading and writing the language, while at the same time you're parallel to that, you're learning a second language, speaking and listening, and then you're also learning the academic part. So they try to pair that up and bridge it. It's basically scaffolding. And it's not important that you memorize what Comments says. That's the point, is to understand that a student who enters your class or is in your school and they're well-educated, pretty well-educated, and read and write in their own language, they're going to have a much more likely chance of success in learning to read and write in English well. In other words, are they going to go to college in an English language classroom? Well, they probably will, or they'll have a chance to. But if they start out having missed 3 years of school in elementary, they're going to have so many concepts they never learn: math, reading, vocabulary knowledge in their own language, that when they try to make up for that, while at the same time not even having a bilingual program, actually just going and learning it in English, it's very questionable. You can just think about it. Well, I don't know how to do this in Spanish, this in Spanish, and this in Spanish, but I'm going to do it in English. That's the problem. So that's it in a nutshell. Another thing that's cool about language learning factors is motivation. Sometimes if someone marries someone, and say you marry someone who speaks French and you're very in love with them, and you're going to make your life with them, you're going to learn French. Okay, assuming you're in France doing it. You may say if they're here, they're going to learn English. But it depends on how people see themselves also. I found that if individuals identify very strongly with their first language and their first country, they may be resistant to learning the second language. That's kind of a social identity, mention it in here. I think it's also part of personality. Age is obviously important, but it's not, you can't just assume that young children will master a second language because they're young. You still must provide scaffolding. You must provide opportunity. I think I mentioned, I can't remember which class I'm teaching now, but you want to realize that, like with the SIOP, you want to provide in class, not just lecture, but you want to provide them with opportunities for interaction in an academic sense, group work, working together, thinking out problems, etc., explaining how to do a math problem. And it's okay to have some Spanish or whatever their first language is. That can be used. You want them to grasp the concept, but you also want them to learn the second language. Personality makes a difference. I've noticed in certain cultures, I think sometimes women are better language learners than men. And you might say, well, is that because the brains are different? I don't think so, but it could be. I haven't looked at the research there. But I do believe it has a lot to do with resistance. And if there's a lot of resistance to a second language, for instance, male ego, males are a little hesitant to risk things or to look bad. In certain cultures, the males may actually try to prevent others from learning, because it intimidates them if another guy, less dominant guy, is doing better in class than they are, that makes them look bad. And I've actually seen that happen when they try to intimidate them. Certainly women, I think, are better second language learners as a general rule, not because their brain is different, but because they're usually they're not trying to protect them ego. These are not scientific statements I'm making you, they're just observations. Level of first language development is obviously huge. if you're young and you're learning a first language, you can learn a second language. By the way, it doesn't inhibit or screw you up to try to learn two languages at the same time. You may have to sort them out and mix words together, but it doesn't. That's an old lie. It's not even a myth. It's a lie. Cognitive ability, obviously, more intelligent people probably have an advantage learning a second language. Some people have a gift, and I'd just say it could be a combination of these factors. They're just more interested. For instance, I'm much more interested in learning French than German because I really admire French. In German, I just haven't had good experiences with it. So that affects me too. They also mentioned family, access to the target language. You want to make sure that kids, you don't want to deny them their first language. You don't want to tell the parents, throw out all the books in the house are in Spanish so you can learn English. They should be comfortable and learn to read and write and practice their first language. The first language is the language of the family, and it must be respected. They mention in here access to the target language. Well, obviously, it depends. Now, most of the time, you'll think that kids will have opportunity on the playground and on television and stuff to learn the second language. But there are cases where individuals get kind of isolated and they just spend all their time. I think most kids will spend their first, they can get isolated in college campuses. International students, if they come in the summer, if they're from certain countries, they don't interact as much, or maybe the environment's not as welcoming. Whatever reason, if they all go off to dorms and stay to themselves, and all the Japanese are together and all the Chinese together, et cetera, et cetera. Americans do this often. They'll go to a foreign country and they're supposed to have an international experience, and they hang out with Americans all the time, and they don't learn the target language. That's because they're not willing to risk, or you need to force them out. It's you have to expose them to the language, so you can't, I used to be in charge of a program where we'd try to get roommates, American roommates, but I found times I would get individuals to be roommates with international students, but they really didn't care about the international students. They weren't committed to interacting. They did it because they got some discounts on their housing, and so they really weren't very friendly at all. So if the willingness is not there, then don't do it. Okay. Now, the final part of Chapter 2, they talk about different types of learning theories: developmental, social interaction, humanistic, cognitive learning theory, behavioral learning theory. I'm not going to have you, I want you to just look at that. I don't go for the behavioral. I think the affective, in other words, the emotional, openness that you're able to present to an international student or to a ESL kid, ELL in your school, the more they're going to progress. The more they're shunned or isolated or allowed to just avoid contact, or it'd be like saying if you're supposed to learn math, but I don't really push too much math on you because I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Or you feel uncomfortable, and so you try to just get someone to help you with your math homework. You really don't want the unpleasantry of having to do the math. You'll not progress in math. The same thing with language. Relationships, social interaction, and I think that's a theory I'm big on, page 45. But designing classes that have a lot of interaction is critical. Absolutely, you cannot have just a lecture-only class. That is a killer. And that's why college sometimes is not very effective, because college professors, we love to lecture. Who would think, So that's part of that chapter that I take. I like it's not a matter, you can't have people memorize vocabulary and study dictionaries. That's out of context. You're better to have students read books, even if you have to get books that are easier or simpler or something that they like. I know a guy, Crashen, said he had students Asian students, and they got them a lower level reading of the Babysitter Club. Some of you may know that. I don't know anything about it, but yes, I'm too academic. I think they came up with those after I grew up. But any kind of Nancy Drew mysteries, but maybe they're a little hard, so you get a simpler version of it. But you don't want it to be academically so simple that it's childlike. Don't give Goodnight Moon to a, to a ninth grader or a fourth grader. It's a baby. It's kind of a child, first grade book. You have to think about their ego here. So I call them high interest, low reading level, or different moderated reading level. And there are books like that. I have some that I could show you, but they're basically high interest, lower reading level. You use the same books with readers, struggling readers that are first English speakers. So that's another issue. Okay. Now, I'm just going to say chapter 3 is really the SIOP in your book. And you've already seen that, talks about it, you can go over it. But basically, this same author is one of the authors of the SIOP book, so it's included in there. Okay? So I hope that covers these 2 chapters for you, chapter 2 and 3 and the sheltered content instruction. In case somebody doesn't have the book, you have the essence of what's important in there.